Sometimes when you're watching a film, you might think to yourself, I've already seen this movie before, or it seems very familiar. And you might be right because there's this very interesting phenomenon that happens in movies sometimes, and it's called twin films. Now, twin films is a very interesting phenomenon where two or more film studios make almost exactly the same movie at the same time. Now, usually these films release worldwide in the same respective year, or sometimes it's a year or two apart. For this video, I wanted to highlight some examples of films that released worldwide in the same year that are almost identical to each other. To start off this list, I wanted to go with a very recent example in 2024, where we had 3 different films where the story is revolving around a woman possibly about to give birth to a demon baby. Now, technically, Immaculate and The First Omen are a lot more similar to each other in comparison to Apartment 7A, because those 2 films involve a nun about to give birth to a demon baby, whereas Apartment 7A, she's a ballet dancer that is about to give birth to a demon baby. Either way, it's kind of interesting that all 3 of these movies came out pretty much almost around the same time last year. And out of these 3, I would say that The First Omen is the strongest out of the 3. Back in 2004, we had 2 films that had a very peculiar and very interesting situation because the stories revolved around a first daughter of America just trying to find love and trying to live a normal life. The first film was Chasing Liberty, which starred Mandy Moore and Matthew Good in the lead roles, and the second film was First Daughter, which starred Katie Holmes in the lead role. Now, if I had to choose between these 2 films, I preferred First Daughter. I thought it was the better of the 2. And very interesting fun facts for First Daughter was that the director of this movie was Academy Award winner Forest Whitaker, and the writer for the film was Jerry O'Connell. Back in 1998, we saw a mega box office battle between Deep Impact and Armageddon, 2 films where an asteroid was threatening the extinction of every living thing on Earth. Now, both of these films became huge blockbusters, but out of the 2, I prefer Armageddon, which ended up becoming the biggest blockbuster in 1998. It's super entertaining. Even though Deep Impact is scientifically more accurate, Armageddon is such a blast. Back in 1999, we saw 2 James Bond actors playing suave and sophisticated robbers as they were trying to pull off incredible heists in Entrapment and in The Thomas Crown Affair. But out of these 2 films, I prefer The Thomas Crown Affair. That is such a great movie. 2013 happened to be the year of Die Hard meets The White House in Olympus Has Fallen and White House Down. Both of these films are highly entertaining, but if I had to choose between the 2, I preferred White House Down. If 1998 was the year of the asteroid threatening extinction on Earth, then 1997 was the year of the volcano eruption film, because Dante's Peak and Volcano both released worldwide in 1997. They're both highly entertaining, but if I had to choose between the 2, I prefer Dante's Peak. It is such a great movie and such a fun thrill ride. 2012 was aka the year of Snow White because we had Mirror Mirror and also Snow White and the Huntsman. But in my personal opinion, these are not specifically the exact same films. Obviously, they revolve around, the Snow White story. But thematically, Snow White and the Huntsman is a little bit darker, and Mirror Mirror is more fantastical and a little bit lighter. But if I had to choose between these 2 films, I kind of preferred Snow White and the Huntsman. 1998 could also be designated as the year of the Ants because we had 2 animated feature films which revolved its stories around ants. And the first film was, namely, Ants, and the second film was A Bug's Life. I would say The Bug's Life is the better of the 2. And then in 2006, we have thrillers based around magicians in The Illusionist and The Prestige. And this is an easy one. The Prestige is a way better film, even though The Illusionist is a very fun film as well. And then in 2022, we had 2 films which based its stories around the famous story of Pinocchio. The Disney version of Pinocchio, and also Guillermo del Toro's version of Pinocchio. Del Toro's version of Pinocchio is the way better and more superior film. 1989 happens to be the year where a police officer gets a new partner for investigations, and that partner happens to be a big and lovable dog. The first film happened to be K9, and the second film happened to be Turner and Hooch. Turner and Hooch is the better of these 2 films, and it's a great and lovable movie too. 1998 also happened to be the year of prestige World War II epics in The Thin Red Line and Saving Private Ryan. Both of these films happen to be masterpieces, two of my all-time favorite movies, but if I had to choose between these two films, I would give the slight edge to Saving Private Ryan. 1999 saw two religious-based thrillers in Stigmata and End of Days, and if I had to choose between these two films, I prefer the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie in End of Days. I think it's highly underrated, and I think it's a very, very, very solid film in his filmography. Though Stigmata features a very good lead performance from Patricia Arquette, and a very interesting fun fact is that Gabrielle Byrne features in both of these movies. Pretty cool. 1999 also featured two films with haunted house kind of situations in The Haunting and House on Haunted Hill. Now, both of these films are not that great, to be honest with you, but if I had to choose between these two, I would say that House on Haunted Hill is the better of the two. Even though The Haunting is a well-made movie in terms of its visuals, House on Haunted Hill is a better horror movie, in my personal opinion. Then in 2005, we had two plane-based thrillers in Red Eye and Flight Plan. And both of these films are equal to each other in my personal opinion. They're both entertaining, but I have to give a slight edge to Red Eye, even though I would say that Jodie Foster's performance in Flight Plan is excellent. And then 2009 happened to be the year of The Mall Cop with Paul Blart Mall Cop and Observe and Report, which starred Seth Rogen in the lead role. If I had to choose between these two movies, they're not my favorites, but I would go with Paul Blart. I think the silly nature of that film worked better for me instead of Observe and Report, which was a little bit darker. And then 2011 happened to be the year of Friends with Benefits, a casual rom-com year with No Strings Attached, which starred Natalie Portman and Ashton Kutcher in the lead roles. And then the other film, Friends with Benefits, which starred Justin Timberlake and Mila Kunis in the lead roles. Ironically, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, who would end up marrying each other later on, starred in both of these movies. So yeah, it was very interesting, I guess. If I had to choose between these two films, I would say Friends with Benefits, probably. Then 2013 happened to be the year of comedic apocalyptic films with This Is the End and The World's End. Even though the stories are not exactly the same as each other, they're both thematically almost the same. And if I had to choose between these two very funny and very entertaining films, I gotta go with This Is the End, one of my all-time favorite comedies. And then 2014, we happened to have two Hercules movies, one with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and the other one directed by Renny Harlin. And this one's a little bit easy to choose. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's Hercules, I thought, was the better of the two films. But it's not an amazing movie, but it was better. And in the year 2000, we had two films that were sci-fi movies which revolved its story around Mars. Mission to Mars and Red Planet. And if I had to choose between the two, it would be Mission to Mars. I'm sure there are tons of other twin film situations in film history. And if you can name some, write them in the comments below. But yeah, go watch these twin films whenever you can.